The irony of this, to me, is really astounding. By objecting to us to go to conference, the Senate Republicans who are objecting are actually putting us right in the position of being in the place where the debt ceiling may well be part of a budget conference, because the House of Representatives wants to appoint conferees and have a budget done fairly quickly once they appoint conferees, because they have told us they don't want to go through a series of votes, as we all did. I think it's 20 days. So if you object to go to conference at this point,
5:30 having arrived.
I would ask for one additional minute.
Is there objection?
By objecting to go to conference right now, what the Senate Republicans who are objecting are doing is pushing us to a place where the debt limit will, by virtue of timing, have to be a part of it. May be a part of
having
discussion.
arrived.
I would ask the senators to think about what they are doing by their objection in forcing us into that position, and suggest that by allowing us to go to conference now,
5:30 having arrived.
have a better chance of not going.
The chair recognizes the senator from Michigan.
Thank you very much, Madam President. On behalf of Senator Leahy, I would call up Amendment 998. I will once again call for regular order.
S-954 is the pending business.
Thank you very much. On behalf of Senator Leahy, I would call up Amendment 998.
The clerk will report.
The senator from Michigan, Ms. Stabenow, for Mr. Leahy, proposes an amendment numbered 998, beginning.
I would consent that further reading of the amendment be dispensed with.
Is there objection? Hearing none. Without objection.
Madam President, we have made great progress today. I want to thank colleagues for their work today and bringing forth amendments, and we will continue to work with members as we go forward tomorrow, putting together a number of votes to bring before the body. We are working hard to do everything possible to complete this legislation by the end of the week. I think we're on good track. I would announce that on behalf of the two leaders, there will be no more votes this evening, and I would ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to a period of morning business until 6:30, with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection.
Madam President.
Senator from Louisiana.
Thank you, Madam President. I really appreciate the hard work of the senators from Michigan and Mississippi in moving a farm bill through the Senate. It's really one of the most important bills we'll take up this year, and action on this bill is long overdue, and I'm very hopeful that we can continue to make progress and produce a bill that is excellent for every region of our country. Of course, representing the South, we always like to have a special attention given to our agricultural needs, and the senator from Michigan most certainly has been attuned to the farmers and rural communities in Louisiana, so we appreciate her leadership. I came to the floor today, though, just for a few moments to speak about the tragedy unfolding in Oklahoma, in Moore, Oklahoma, a city that was devastated, portions of the city in the suburban areas, by a horrible tornado, one of the largest to hit our nation in quite some time. And I understand, while I do not know all of the details, Madam President, that it was a very high-level tornado that stayed on the ground for almost 40 minutes. It was miles wide and created just a terrible path of destruction. There are, of course, adults and children that have lost their lives. Recovery and rescue is still underway as I speak, and I am certain that the delegation, both the Senate and the House members from Oklahoma, are doing everything they can, working with the governor and local officials to provide as much support as they will need. I come to the floor as the chair of the Committee on Homeland Security, and I come to the floor as a senator that unfortunately has had a lot of experience in disasters, to say how proud I am that there is about $11 billion available without the requirement or necessity of an offset for the people of Oklahoma. This was a battle that was fought over a year ago, led by Senator Harry Reid and myself and others. This arrangement was made in the Budget Control Act so that there would be a significant pot of money set aside in the event that disasters like this happened, whether it was a tornado or an earthquake or a fire or a flood. And, Madam President, it's happened again. We don't know exactly when these disasters are going to happen, and we don't know the exact nature of them, but we most certainly know from past experience and everything that our science tells us about the changes in the atmosphere that they're going to happen and that they're likely going to get worse. That is why I have been really very focused on this issue, and I'm proud of this Senate, Republicans and Democrats, but I'm very proud of the support of the Democratic leaders on this bill to say now is not the time, not this afternoon, not tomorrow morning, not Friday, not Monday, to be debating offsets for victims of the Oklahoma tornado. After a disaster, our citizens don't need or want a debate on funding. What they want is help, and they are going to get it from the committee that I chair. Our people suffered so much in Katrina, Rita, Gustav, and Ike. I've watched the East Coast have to recover now from Irene and from Sandy. I've seen horrible tornadoes in Missouri, and the last thing that people want when they're digging their loved ones out of rubble and preparing, unfortunately, for funerals that are going to have to be prepared for what happened, the last thing they want to see Congress do is debating about how and when we're going to pay for this disaster. We are going to send them the money they need to recover. And I want to say this to Senator Colburn, my good friend. He's not on the floor. I do respect his consistency on this issue. Even when this tornado hit his state, he's still calling for offsets. He has been consistent, but, Madam President, in my view, he's been consistently wrong. There will be no offsets. There are no need for offsets. I will not support offsets, and the majority of the Democrats, if not the entire Democratic caucus, will not support offsets for Americans in need in disaster. What we're going to do is support appropriate help and efficient help to them. And let me just say for the record, because of the Sandy supplemental, which I also fought for with my colleagues from the Northeast, we were able to put some reforms in that bill. It wasn't just send the money and do what you will with it. We sent money to the Northeast. We also sent them new tools in a bigger, stronger toolbox to help them with a better recovery. Now, we have a lot more to do, in my view, in the Northeast. That is a subject for another day, and I realize that they're in lots of difficulty. But we did send some new tools that will help the people of Oklahoma. First, we sent them the ability to quickly establish mutually agreed upon estimates for project cost. That has been a real problem of recovery in the past, with local governments arguing one thing, the feds offering something else. We now have a better, quicker process to agree on what the project costs to get it built more quickly. The project cost will be validated by an independent expert and panel protecting the taxpayer, which is important. And applicants are now allowed to consolidate projects in a common-sense way to build back smarter, reducing future recovery costs. And most importantly for this disaster, and we fought hard for this in Sandy, that finally there are some provisions in the recovery bill that will allow children to be the center of attention. Now, sadly, we've lost some children in this disaster. Sadly, many children were injured, and probably thousands of children have been traumatized. But because of the new bill that we passed under Sandy, there are some provisions to help. In addition, families can receive day care now through their supplemental, so the parents that are going to have to figure out a way to get back to work and rebuild their businesses and their communities and their houses can have some additional federal child care, which will help. And in addition, I think there are going to be more counselors on the ground helping children than in past disasters. I see colleagues on the floor, so let me finish up quickly. We have implemented an automated family reunification database to ensure that children are returned to parents. Now, this was a relatively small place, well-known. We don't believe there are any children that are unknown to their parents. All of the statistics, however, are not in of people missing, et cetera. So, but there are provisions right now at work with FEMA helping for family reunification. And coordinators are already on the ground that specialize in looking out for specific needs of children in disasters. And I want to thank the coalition that worked with me for years to put that into place. So again, there will be no offset. There is no reason to need an offset. We have the $11 billion thanks to good work of many people in this chamber and on the other side of this Capitol to provide this funding for this disaster. And so let's hope. I know that FEMA's on the ground. They'll do the best they can. And in this case, tornado insurance, which is carried by many people in this area, and I'm doing a little bit more research into if it's mandatory or voluntary, but a combination of local help and state help and federal help and private insurance, and of course the great spirit of volunteerism, I am confident that after we finish this very sad recovery and shock that this community is going through, that we will be able to help them build a stronger and more vibrant community of more Oklahoma in the future. And I yield the floor.
Thank you. Madam President.
Senator from Utah.
Madam President, earlier today we were asked to give our consent to go to conference on the budget resolution. This is an important matter because we've gone now more than 4 years without a budget. This has been a great concern to many of us, and I don't think there's one member of this body that would not want Congress to pass a budget this year. We would like to see that happen. We need that. We do, however, have a concern, some of us, with the request that we go to conference without certain assurances. Most importantly, we want a very simple assurance that any conference report that results from this conference will not be used to raise the debt limit. The reason for this is simple. This is an important matter at a time when we've racked up about $17 trillion in debt. We want some assurances that this important decision will be made under the regular order of the Senate, that the normal rules of the Senate will apply to this, that this won't be negotiated behind closed doors in a backroom deal. The American people deserve more than this. They demand more than this. And so to those who may have questioned our motives in connection with this, I ask them a very simple question. Will you give us an assurance that you're not going to use the conference report to raise the debt limit? If they can answer that question to our satisfaction, if they can simply give me an assurance that that's not what they're going to use it for, then I will gladly give my consent. So I'd invite that to be the topic of discussion. And all this begs the question, why wouldn't they give that assurance? What on earth is wrong with the regular order? What on earth is wrong with giving an assurance that in connection with a conference report on a budget resolution, they wouldn't be willing to say, if we're going to raise the debt limit, we're going to do it under the regular order? Thank you, Madam President.
Madam President.
Senator from Louisiana.
I was just going to talk about the tornadoes, but I'm going to go ahead and take a minute to respond to my colleague from Utah. There are members objecting to going to regular order on the budget, and he's one of them. The senator from Utah himself is objecting to regular order, which would be to go to conference on the budget. He was one of the critics when he was running for this office. He has numerous statements on his way to becoming a senator, and here that the Senate and the House needed to have a budget. Now, the House has passed a budget, the Senate has passed a budget, and yet the senator from Utah is the one, along with the senator from Kentucky and I understand the senator from Arizona, Senator McCain, earlier today objecting to going to conference to resolve the differences. Now, I know the senator from Utah has read the Constitution like I have. The Constitution and the laws that created the Senate of the United States give great strength to the minority, of which he is in the minority. But nowhere in the Constitution does it say that one senator from one state has the right to write the rules and laws for the whole country. I've read it lots of times. I've never seen that. But evidently that's what the senator from Utah wants. He just said if we would just do what he wants, we could proceed. Well, I have news for him and for the senators that are objecting. It's not about what they individually want. It's collectively what we want together, representing all of the people of our country, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, and liberals. And for 4 years, this same group yelled and screamed about not having a budget. Now we have one. Now they're yelling and screaming about they don't want to work out the differences. I honestly don't know how to please colleagues like this. Literally. We had to listen to them ranting and raving for years about we don't have a budget. So we worked extra hard, even though we said at the time, and I was one of them, that no, they're right. Technically, we did not have a budget. But as you know, Madam President, we had something that was actually stronger than a budget. We had spending limits that had the real teeth of law. What people might not realize is that budgets are aspirations. Just like when you do a budget at home, you can say, my budget this year is going to be, you know, $25,000 spending budget. It's an aspiration. You sometimes spend a little more or less. There's no mechanism for control. It's just an outline. Those are important. But what we had, we thought, as the Democratic leadership, is better than a budget. We had actual spending controls. But that wasn't enough for the Republicans. They knew we had spending controls, but they still went on Fox News and everywhere else explaining to people that we had no budget, inferring that there were no controls. It's patently false. Patently false. We had spending controls. We have spending controls now, spending limits that are agreed to by Republicans and Democrats, except that there are a handful of Republicans that don't agree with those limits. So they've decided, because they represent, you know, half of 4 states, that they want their way or the highway. Now the whole Congress can't go to a conference on a budget. I don't understand this. I understand protecting minority rights. I understand making sure that everyone's voice is heard. I understand that, you know, everybody can't get everything they want. But what I don't understand are my colleagues, the senator from Utah, the senator from Kentucky, the senator from Arizona, saying, no, we can't go to a conference to work out the differences on the budget so that the United States could move more quickly to a balanced budget, after complaining year after year after year that we didn't have a budget. It is really the height of hypocrisy. And it is completely unexplainable, their position, or unacceptable. So I'm glad I was on the floor. I came just to talk about the tornado, but I'm glad I got a chance to give comment for the record about why not many, but there are a few Republican leaders that have stopped the entire budget process until they get their way exactly the way they want it. You know, that's just not the way our government works. We don't have kings anymore. We don't have dictators anymore. We don't have people with special powers. We're all humans, and we're all on equal footing, and we're all elected to represent our constituents, and not anyone in this chamber is entitled to write the budget exactly the way they want it. Now, if I wanted to do something, I could say just as easily as he could say, well, I'm going to object unless you promise me that X, Y, and Z is going to be in the budget. I could say that. So could the senator that sits next to me, Senator Sanders and Senator Carper. Every senator could say that. We all have things that are just very important to us in our constituency. But if we act like that, and we don't act mature and sensible, we'll never get anything done. And that's where we are. We have a handful of Republican senators, maybe less than 5, I don't know, who are objecting every day, so we cannot take our budgets to conference to have them reconciled. After yelling at everybody for 4 years about why we didn't have a budget, the only way we're going to get a budget is to go to conference, regular order, and work out the differences in a public meeting with public votes, not behind closed doors or not in some back room somewhere, but in a public meeting, in a conference, to talk about what programs or what levels of funding should be reduced, what revenues potentially could be raised, and then, according to our process, then those directions are given to appropriation committees, and we can go do our work building a budget, not a budget, building an appropriation for defense, building an appropriation for education, building appropriation for health, for our veterans. If we don't have a budget, we can't even go to regular order on appropriations. And as an appropriator, it's getting really frustrating around here to not be able to go to a regular appropriation meeting and sit down like we used to do before this new crew showed up and talk about meeting our budget caps and how we wanted to allocate the taxpayer money in a public, open meeting. Instead of cramming things in and an omnibus bill, doing deals in the middle of the night, if they would just let us get back to regular order and do the people's business, I promise you the people of Utah would be happy. The people of Arizona would be happy. The people of Kentucky would be happy. They just want us to get back to regular order and try to negotiate a budget that the majority, and not even the regular majority, around here we have to have 60 votes to do anything. So before a conference committee can come back, there'd have to be a broad understanding of what was going to be in that conference. And let me say the final argument. I could understand a little trepidation on the part of the minority if they weren't in control of the House. But the Republicans have control of the House. The Democrats have control of the Senate. So, I mean, I could understand if one party had both the Senate and the House, that what might come out of conference and it could get rammed down and the minority could be caught off balance. But the minority controls the House. And so this is as fair a fight as you're going to have with one body, one party controlling one and one party controlling the other. And yes, the president is a Democrat, but he's indicated, I think, his very open-minded support for entitlement reform when it's appropriate and additional revenues that are being raised. The president has not put any particular line in the sand that I'm aware of. He's been quite reasonable about this, but he cannot sign a budget unless we can get it to his desk. But we have 3 or 4 senators that, if they can't get it exactly the way they want it, they're going to hold up everything. I don't think that's what the American people want, and I'm disappointed in my colleagues, and I yield the floor. And I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll. Mr. Alexander.